Lena Aurora, a brilliant yet underestimated math student at a prestigious university, is thrust into the spotlight when a notorious professor challenges her with an impossible question meant to embarrass her. Armed with quiet determination and a creative mind that defies rigid traditions, Lena must navigate a world resistant to change, where every step toward innovation feels like walking a tightrope. As she confronts skepticism and silent opposition, her unique approach could either shatter the old guard or leave her isolated. This is a story of hidden potential, courage, and the fight to transform education from the inside out. Lena Aurora's clutched her notebooks a little tighter and smoothed the crease of her simple blouse as she approached Lecture Hall 3B, the battleground where tradition met innovation every Wednesday morning. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, with expectation. Rows of wooden seats filled quickly with students scribbling notes or reviewing last night's homework. At the front stood Professor Caleb Langston, a figure as imposing as the ivory pillars lining the entrance halls. His graying temples framed a face carved from stern resolve, and his eyes, sharp as flint, scanned the room with practiced authority. Lena slipped into her usual spot near the front, arranging her notebooks and pencil case. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, not just from classmates, but from Langston himself. There was something about his stare that made her skin prickle, a cold mixture of scrutiny and skepticism. The rumor mill whispered that Langston was unforgiving, especially toward those who dared to think differently. Today, the curriculum was expected to unfold in its usual rigid cadence. Lectures steeped in tradition, heavy with proofs and rote methodologies. But Lena had sensed a different energy beneath the surface, a subtle undercurrent of tension that tightened her chest. The classroom buzzed to silence as Langston raised his hand, eyes locking onto hers. "Miss Aurora," his voice carried effortlessly. Through the hall, "Step forward." A hush rippled. Lena's heart hit a steady rhythm, the kind that sharpened every sense, set fire to every nerve ending. The moment stretched thin, taut like a wire ready to snap. Langston stepped aside, revealing a blackboard that held a single sentence written in chalk: "Solve this." In a set of numbers where every element satisfies PX, prove or disprove that. Q holds true. It was a question she'd heard whispered about, the infamous Langston's trap, a puzzle designed less to teach than to entrap. No student had solved it in over a decade. The room watched, breath barely held. Lena's fingers brushed the edge of her notebook, her mind flashing through layers of logic, theorems, and counterexamples. The question wasn't just hard, it was a gauntlet thrown down, the kind of challenge meant to expose weakness. She felt the weight of her classmates' gazes, some doubtful, some curious. Matteo, sitting a few seats behind her, gave a subtle nod of encouragement. The silence pressed harder. Langston's lips curled in the faintest hint of a smirk. "Take your time," he said softly, but his words were laced with irony. Lena took a deep breath and set her pen to paper. The world narrowed. The noise of shuffling feet and whispered conjectures faded, until only the question and the pen remained. Her mind danced through the traps. The obvious interpretations were riddled with logical dead ends. But Lena's training with Dr. Malik, a high school mentor who preached creativity over memorization, surged forth. She began sketching a geometric representation, translating abstract predicates into shapes and spaces. Her strokes were deliberate, precise, but alive with a rhythm that defied the stiff rigidity Langston preached. A knot of tension coiled in her stomach. This wasn't just math. It was a quiet rebellion against an education system that prized conformity over insight. She felt Langston's gaze piercing her back, a silent challenge to falter. But she pressed on, weaving together strands of logic and intuition, until finally she saw the path. A solution that sidestepped the common traps by reframing the problem entirely. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote the concluding statement. Therefore, Q holds under the conditions given not by the standard proof, but through this novel equivalence. A sudden stir filled the room. Heads turned, whispered gasps floated to Lena's ears. Langston's eyes narrowed, flickering with a mixture of disbelief and something else, a grudging respect. "Explain," he demanded, voice firmer now. Lena rose, steady despite the rapid thud of her heart. This isn't a contradiction, but a redefinition of P that allows Q to emerge naturally. It requires thinking beyond the predicate's surface, beyond the standard axioms. She could hear a few students murmuring their agreement, while others sat stunned. Langston paced slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "You challenge tradition," he said quietly, almost grudgingly. "I challenge stagnation," Lena replied, voice steady. The room held its breath. Langston's smirk vanished. For a moment the unyielding facade softened, revealing a glimpse of uncertainty. Later, as the students filed out, Lena felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. Matteo caught up to her in the hallway. "That was brilliant," Matteo said quietly. "You shook the whole room." She smiled, but the knot in her stomach tightened. Change was dangerous, especially here. Word spread fast. Lena found herself approached by a group of students, passionate, eager, hungry for something different. "Can we meet after class?" one asked. "Let's talk about how we can push for real change," another said. Lena nodded, feeling the first spark of something bigger, a movement brewing beneath the surface. But the path ahead was steep. In a faculty meeting the next week, Dean Margaret Collins announced the formation of a curriculum reform committee. Langston's jaw tightened visibly when he saw Lena named as co-chair alongside him. The tension in the room was palpable. Langston's voice was cold as he addressed the group. "The foundation of mathematics is built on rigor and discipline. Creativity has its place, but it cannot replace precision." Lena stood her ground. "Without creativity, rigor becomes rigidity. We risk teaching formulas without understanding." Whispers broke out, some supportive, some hostile. Dr. Harold Benson, a senior faculty member, scoffed. "This is dangerous territory. We cannot afford to dilute standards." Lena's jaw clenched. She was ready for the fight. Outside the meeting room, Lena felt eyes watching her, some full of hope, others filled with quiet contempt. Matteo found her, a determined spark in his eyes. "We're behind you," Matteo said. "The students want this." Lena nodded. She realized the change wouldn't come from lectures alone. It would come from collective voices demanding it. Weeks passed in a whirlwind of debates, pilot programs, and late-night discussions. Lena and Langston clashed constantly. He defended the old guard with unyielding pride. She pushed for innovation with relentless passion. Their arguments grew heated, their faces etched with fatigue and frustration. But beneath the surface, something shifted. Langston began to see the value in Lena's approach, if begrudgingly. Lena, in turn, learned to respect the foundation that Langston so fiercely protected. Together, they started drafting a new curriculum proposal, a blend of creativity and rigor, tradition and innovation. In the quiet moments, Lena often thought back to that morning in Lecture Hall 3B, the day she stepped into the light and faced the challenge meant to break her. The trick question had become a symbol, not just of the obstacles she faced, but of the potential to rise above. She felt hope, swell, fierce and bright. Change was possible, and this was only the beginning. The wood-paneled walls of the mathematics department's conference room smelled faintly of old varnish and lingering coffee. The long mahogany tables stretched between rows of leather chairs, but only half were occupied. Faculty members had come, some reluctantly, others curious or outright skeptical. At one end, Professor Caleb Langston sat with his arms folded, eyes narrowing as Lena Aurora entered the room with quiet determination. Dean Margaret Collins stood at the head of the table, her voice steady but measured. "Thank you all for gathering. As you know, we're here to discuss the Curriculum Reform Committee. Professor Langston and Miss Aurora will be co-chairs. I expect professional conduct and open minds." The room was thick with tension. The unspoken conflict between tradition and innovation crackled in the air. Langston's voice cut through the quiet. The foundation of mathematics is discipline and rigor. We cannot afford to weaken that under the guise of creativity. Lena met his gaze calmly. Without room for creativity, rigor calcifies into rigidity. Students lose engagement, and the curriculum fails its purpose. Dr. Harold Benson, a senior faculty member notorious for his conservative views, scoffed loudly. "Miss Aurora, you speak of creativity like it's some panacea. Math is a science of absolute truths, not artistic license." Lena's jaw tightened. She was used to this resistance, but it never got easier. "Respectfully, Dr. Benson, innovation is not license. It is evolution. Our students deserve a curriculum that challenges them to think deeply, not just memorize blindly." Langston's eyes flickered with something like grudging respect before hardening again. "This committee will proceed with caution. We cannot sacrifice standards for novelty." Outside the conference room, the corridor buzzed with whispered conversations. Lena walked beside Matteo and a small group of students who had gathered to show their support. Matteo's voice was steady but passionate. "People are tired of being ignored. This isn't just about math. It's about how we learn, how we think." Lena nodded. She could feel the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but also the growing strength from the students rallying behind her. "We'll need to organize," she said. "If the faculty won't listen, the student voice must be louder." Matteo smiled, the spark of hope lighting his eyes. "We've got your back." Inside the faculty lounge, Langston poured himself a strong black coffee. Lena entered quietly, holding a stack of papers filled with research studies on innovative teaching methods. "May I?" she asked, indicating the empty chair opposite. "Him." Langston didn't respond at first, eyes fixed on his cup. Then, almost reluctantly, he gestured for her to sit. "I've reviewed your proposal," he began, voice low but firm. "Some of your ideas have merit, though I question their practicality." Lena leaned forward. "I don't expect overnight changes. That's why I propose a pilot program, a controlled environment to test these methods with willing students." Langston's fingers drummed on the table. "Very well, we'll try your pilot. But I warn you, if this undermines academic rigor, I will withdraw my support." Lena met his gaze squarely. "I welcome the challenge." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of planning and tension. Lena and Langston worked together in an uneasy partnership, navigating faculty politics, logistical hurdles, and their own clashing philosophies. In the pilot classrooms, Lena introduced modules that encouraged students to explore math concepts through real-world problems, creative projects, and collaborative discussions. Langston observed silently at first, his critical gaze never far. One afternoon, Lena watched Matteo lead a group through a complex optimization problem. The students debated energetically, their voices overlapping in excitement rather than silence. Langston stood behind the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Later, Lena approached him. "What do you think?" Langston hesitated. "They are engaged. That is undeniable." Lena smiled softly, sensing a crack in his armor. Not all faculty members were so open. Dr. Benson's opposition grew louder, his public criticisms cutting through committee meetings like a scalpel. "This pilot risks turning mathematics into entertainment," he declared. "It panders to weaknesses instead of strengthening them." Other professors murmured agreement, while some remained silent, unsure where to stand. Lena's confidence wavered in those moments, but the steady encouragement from Matteo and the Bay students bolstered her resolve. One late evening, after a particularly fractious meeting, Lena sat alone in the library, poring over pedagogical journals. The weight of opposition pressed on her chest like a stone. Langston appeared quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You should rest," he said quietly, handing her a cup. "I can't," Lena admitted. "Not while they dismiss this work as frivolous." Langston sat beside her. "Change is never welcomed easily. I've seen generations resist the new." She looked at him, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Why stay? You could walk away." He sighed. "Because it's right. If we're to move forward, it must be together." For the first time, Lena saw not just the professor, but the man behind the authority. As the pilot program progressed, Lena and Langston's working relationship deepened. They argued fiercely, Langston insisting on discipline and precision, Lena championing creativity and relevance. One committee meeting devolved into shouting matches, voices echoing off the high ceilings. "I'm not advocating weakness," Lena snapped. "I want students to understand, not just recite." Langston's eyes blazed. "And I want them to respect the foundations that make understanding possible." The room fell silent, breath caught between conflict and possibility. Behind the scenes, student activism swelled. Mateo organized study groups, petitions, and open forums. Students shared stories of frustration with the old curriculum, of feeling invisible and unheard. At one forum, Lena stood before a packed auditorium. Her voice was steady but impassioned. "We're not asking for leniency," she told them. "We want education that sees us, that challenges us to grow, not just conform." The applause was thunderous. Back in faculty meetings, Lena found unexpected allies among younger professors who saw the need for change. Their quiet support was a lifeline amid the storm of resistance. Langston, once a towering adversary, became a reluctant mentor. He shared his vast knowledge of mathematical theory and academic politics, guiding Lena through the complex dance of leadership. Together they drafted a new curriculum proposal that balanced the best of tradition with the promise of innovation. One evening, Lena sat alone in the empty math building, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. The document before her was the result of months of struggle, compromise, and growth. The trick question that had once symbolized the old traps now seemed a distant memory, a catalyst for something new. She felt a flicker of hope, bright and steady. Change was hard, change was slow, but change was coming, and she was ready. The boardroom at Hargrove University was colder than Lena Aurora had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a city skyline muted beneath a thick layer of grey clouds, but inside, the atmosphere felt heavier still. Polished mahogany tables gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. Around the elongated table sat university executives, Dean Margaret Collins presiding with quiet authority, Finance Director Edward Blake tapping impatiently on his tablet, and Curriculum Oversight Chair, Dr. Helena Marsh, observing with inscrutable eyes. Lena clutched her presentation notes, feeling the familiar hum of tension coil through her veins. Across the table, Professor Caleb Langston sat upright, his usual stern composure tempered by the gravity of this moment. They had traveled far from that first lecture hall confrontation, and yet here they were again, partners on the precipice of change. Dean Collins broke the silence. "Thank you both for coming. We've reviewed the initial reports on the proposed curriculum overhaul. Today, we expect a comprehensive presentation and open discussion." Lena nodded, took a breath, and began. "Our traditional curriculum, while foundational, has become rigid, trapping students in outdated paradigms. This pilot program was designed to balance rigor with creativity, fostering deeper understanding and critical thinking." She clicked. The remote and the screen behind her lit up with graphs and charts. Student engagement metrics rising, retention rates improving, test scores climbing steadily. Langston took over smoothly. "Beyond numbers, we gathered qualitative feedback. Here are excerpts from student testimonials," he said, signaling to a video clip. Voices filled the room. Young students speaking candidly about renewed excitement in math classes, how hands-on projects and interdisciplinary approaches helped concepts resonate beyond formulas. Lena's gaze swept the room. Some board members nodded, others remained impassive. Then Dr. Marsh leaned forward, voice precise. "Miss Aurora, Professor Langston, the results are promising. However, I must ask, how scalable is this program? What resources will be required?" For a full rollout," Edward Blake interjected. "And what are the cost implications?" "Our budget is constrained," Lena exchanged a brief look with Langston before replying. We propose phased implementation. Existing faculty can be trained through workshops and mentorship led by early adopters. Technology integration will reduce overhead by leveraging blended learning. Langston added, faculty development is critical. We're recommending a mentorship program to support transition, minimizing disruption. A board member raised a skeptical eyebrow. What about faculty resistant to change? How do you plan to address that? Lena's voice grew firm, tinged with resolve. Change is never universally welcomed. We are committed to ongoing dialogue and transparency. The pilot's success has already begun shifting opinions, and we will provide support and training to ease adoption. The room fell into a heavy silence as the board retreated to deliberate. Lena and Langston waited just outside, tension etched into their faces. Langston finally broke the quiet. You held your ground well, Lena offered. A tight smile. So did you. When the board returned, Dr. Marsh delivered their decision, unanimous approval for the curriculum overhaul. Applause filled the room, but Lena and Langston exchanged a glance that acknowledged the real work had just begun. The weeks that followed felt surreal. The math department transformed from a battleground into a hive of purposeful energy. Classrooms, once silent under strict lecture formats, buzzed with vibrant discussions and collaborative problem-solving. Walls that had held only equations and dry proofs now displayed colorful student projects, from mathematical models inspired by environmental science to interactive simulations linking algebra to architecture. Lena found herself in the thick of it, not just as a co-architect of change, but as a mentor and leader. Matteo, once a peer, now looked to her for guidance as student groups organized workshops and study sessions under her encouragement. Langston's presence remained a steady undercurrent. Often, Lena caught him observing quietly from the back of a classroom or lingering after meetings to share insights steeped in decades of experience. One afternoon, Lena stood before a packed lecture hall, her voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering beneath her ribs. We've built a curriculum that honors the strength of tradition while embracing innovation, she told the students, her eyes sweeping over eager faces. This is your education, dynamic, challenging, and yours to shape. Applause broke out, genuine and warm, but transformation was never without resistance. Dr. Harold Benson and a faction of senior faculty remained vocal opponents, their doubts voiced in faculty meetings and whispered corridors. The sanctity of mathematics cannot be compromised for trends, Benson argued, voice echoing off the high ceilings. We risk diluting standards and confusing students. Lena faced those criticisms head-on in committee meetings. Standards evolve, she countered firmly. We're not abandoning rigor, but expanding what it means to understand math. It's time to trust students' potential to think differently. Langston, often quiet in these debates, finally spoke with quiet authority. I too was wary, but I've witnessed growth, not just in students but in myself. This balance of rigor and creativity is not a threat, it is a necessity. His words shifted the tide. One evening, Lena found herself alone in the math building's atrium, staring out at the darkening city skyline. The journey from that daunting trick question to this moment of hope had been arduous. A soft voice interrupted her reverie. You've done well. Langston stood beside her, older now, but eyes still sharp and thoughtful. It's more than I imagined, Lena admitted. Sometimes I still wonder if I'm ready for this. Langston smiled, a rare warmth breaking through. You've grown beyond that question, the one designed to trap. You've rewritten the rules. They stood side by side, two figures, shaped by conflict and collaboration. Months later, the university held a ceremony celebrating the curriculum's full adoption. Lena and Langston sat together on the stage, honored guests clapping and smiling. A student stepped forward to speak, Matteo articulate and confident. This new approach gave us more than knowledge, Matteo said. It gave us confidence, curiosity, and the courage to see math not as a prison, but as a key. Lena caught Langston's eye and saw pride reflected there. The journey was far from over. Obstacles remained, challenges would arise, but the path was clear. Innovation had not triumphed over tradition. It had found harmony with it, and in that harmony, a generation of students discovered their hidden potential. As the applause echoed, Lena thought back to the trick question that had sparked everything. Once a symbol of limits and traps, now a reminder of how far they had come. The curriculum wasn't just rewritten on paper, it was etched into the hearts and minds of those who dared to challenge, to learn, and to grow. She smiled, hopeful and resolute. This was just the beginning.